Have you ever studied English for years, learned grammar rules, memorized vocabulary lists, watched lessons again and again, but the moment someone suddenly speaks English to you, in real life, your mind goes completely blank and you still cannot respond naturally? Have you ever understood almost everything in a video but felt completely frozen when it was finally your turn to speak? Have you ever felt embarrassed because deep inside you knew you were not stupid, yet somehow your English still felt trapped inside your head instead of coming out of your mouth? Have you ever wondered why some people become fluent so naturally, even without studying as hard as you, while you keep trying harder and harder, but still hesitate during simple conversations? If that feeling hurts, then listen carefully, because this may change the way you think about English forever. The problem is not your memory. It is not your vocabulary, and it is definitely not because you are bad at English. The real problem is that your brain has not been living in English long enough to adapt to it naturally, because language is not something your brain masters through occasional study sessions. Language is something your through daily exposure, repeated listening, emotional connection, and constant immersion. And the system failed you because it taught you to study English only during study time instead of surrounding your life with English every single day. So your brain never fully adapted. It never built automatic reactions. It never learned to feel comfortable hearing and using English naturally. But today you are about to discover something powerful. Fluency is not created by studying English harder. It is created by living with English more often. And once you truly understand that, your entire learning process may change forever. And if you feel tired, frustrated, or even ashamed of your English after so many years of trying, I want you to know something important. You are not alone, and more importantly, you are not broken. Because millions of learners around the world experience the exact same pain every single day. They understand more English than they can actually use. They spend years studying, but still freeze during conversations. And slowly, they start doubting themselves, thinking maybe they are too slow, maybe their pronunciation is bad, maybe they simply do not have talent for languages. But the truth is much simpler and much more hopeful than that. The real problem is that your brain was never fully immersed in English long enough to adapt naturally, because language adaptation works exactly like environmental adaptation. Your brain changes according to what it experiences repeatedly every day. And if English only exists in your life for 30 minutes of stressful studying before disappearing again, your brain treats it like temporary information instead of a living communication system. And that is why you can understand English in theory, but still struggle to use it automatically in real life. Because fluency is not created through occasional effort. It is created through constant exposure, daily interaction, and emotional familiarity. And the traditional system completely ignored this. It treated English like a school subject instead of a real environment. It taught you to separate English from your normal life instead of surrounding yourself with it naturally. So your brain never had enough repetition to truly adapt. Imagine trying to learn swimming by reading books about water, but never actually entering the pool. Eventually, your brain becomes full of information, but your body still feels uncomfortable when real movement begins. And that is exactly what happens with English. You became full of rules but lacked immersion. And immersion is what creates comfort, speed, instinct, and natural reaction, because the brain learns fastest through repeated exposure to meaningful patterns, not isolated study sessions. And this is why people who constantly watch English list videos, listen to podcasts, scroll through English social media, read English comments, hear English voices every day, and slowly surround themselves with the language often improve faster than people who only study grammar intensely, because daily immersion forces the brain to adapt automatically over time. And once you finally understand this, something powerful changes inside you. You stop seeing fluency as a talent you are missing and start seeing it as an environment you can build around yourself every single day. I still remember the period of my life when English felt impossible no matter how hard I tried. Every day I studied grammar, memorized vocabulary lists, watched educational lessons, and completed exercises for hours. And honestly, for a long time, I believed that was exactly what serious learners were supposed to do. I thought fluency would eventually arrive automatically if I just kept studying hard enough. But the strange thing was, even after years of effort, I still felt nervous and slow whenever real English appeared in front of me. I could understand textbooks better than conversations. I could pass exercises better than real communication. And every time someone suddenly spoke English, naturally, my brain felt overwhelmed, like it was trying to catch up with something moving too fast. And that feeling frustrated me deeply because I knew I was working hard, but nothing felt natural. English still felt like a foreign object instead of part of my life. And then something unexpected happened that completely changed my understanding of language learning forever. I started spending less time studying English and more time living around English every single day. Not in a dramatic way, but through small daily exposure. I began watching YouTube videos in English while eating, listening to podcasts while walking, reading comments on English social media posts, following creators who spoke naturally, changing my phone settings to English, hearing English voices in the background during normal daily activities. And at first, I did not even realize something important was happening. But slowly, my brain started adapting in ways I had never experienced before. Common phrases became familiar. Without memorization, pronunciation started sounding more natural. Listening became less stressful. And I noticed something shocking. I was beginning to think in English in small moments without forcing it. And for the first time, English no longer felt like a subject I visited occasionally. It started feeling like an environment my brain was learning to survive inside naturally. And that single shift changed everything, because once your brain is exposed to English consistently enough, it begins recognizing patterns automatically without conscious effort, just like a child who hears the same sounds every day eventually learns to understand and react naturally. And this was the moment I realized the biggest mistake I had made for years. I was trying to master English through isolated study instead of daily immersion. I was treating English like homework instead of a living experience. And the moment I surrounded myself with English consistently, even imperfectly, my progress accelerated more than all the years of traditional studying combined. Because immersion did something grammar books never could. It trained my brain to feel comfortable with English in real life. And once comfort appears, confidence starts growing naturally from the inside out. So here is the big idea that changes everything once you truly understand it. Your brain does not become fluent because you study English occasionally. Your brain becomes fluent because it adapts to the environment you repeatedly live in every single day. And this is exactly why immersion is so powerful, because immersion turns English from information into experience. And experience is what rewires the brain naturally. Think about it for a moment. Nobody taught you your native language through grammar charts. First, your brain learned through constant exposure, repeated sounds, emotional repetition, patterns, context, and daily interaction. You heard the language around you so often that your brain eventually adapted automatically without consciously memorizing rules. And English works the exact same way. The more your brain is surrounded by English consistently, the more natural it starts feeling over time. And that is why daily exposure matters so much more than occasional intense study sessions. Because the brain changes through frequency, not force, and this is where most learners accidentally sabotage it themselves. They treat English like a temporary task instead of a permanent environment. They study for 1 hour and then spend the remaining 23 hours completely disconnected from the language. So the brain never fully adapts, it resets constantly. And every new study session feels difficult again because immersion was broken. But when English becomes part of your normal life, even in small ways, everything begins changing beneath the surface. Watching videos in English, listening to podcasts while walking, reading simple posts in English, hearing English voices daily, following English creators, thinking simple thoughts in English, speaking to yourself in English. These small repeated exposures create something incredibly powerful over time: familiarity. And familiarity is the foundation of fluency because your brain stops treating English like a threat and starts treating it like something normal. And once English feels normal, your reactions become faster, your listening becomes easier, your speaking becomes less stressful, and you begin understanding without translating every single word consciously. Because immersion trains your brain to process meaning directly instead of analytically. And that is the secret most traditional systems ignore. Fluency is not just knowledge. Fluency is adaptation. And adaptation only happens when your environment changes consistently enough for your brain to adjust naturally. So if you truly want to speak English more confidently, stop asking, how many grammar rules should I memorize? And start asking, how much English exists around me every day. Because the environment you create around yourself will shape your fluency far more than the textbooks you study occasionally ever could. Let me show you what real immersion actually looks like in daily life, because many people imagine immersion means moving to another country or studying English all day long. But real immersion is much simpler and much more powerful than that. Immersion means surrounding your brain with English so consistently that it slowly becomes familiar and automatic without forcing yourself constantly. For example, imagine two learners. The first learner studies grammar for 1 hour every night and then spends the rest of the day completely disconnected from English. They watch content in their native language, scroll social media in their native language, think only in their native language, and hear almost no English outside study time. Now imagine the second learner. This person may study less formally, but they constantly expose themselves to English throughout the day. They listen to English podcasts while commuting, watch YouTube videos in English while eating, follow English creators on social media, read simple captions and comments in English, hear English music, change their phone language to English, think small thoughts or thoughts like, I'm tired or I need coffee in English, and even speak shortened sentences to themselves naturally during daily activities. Now, here is the important question. Which brain do you think adapts faster to English over time? The answer becomes obvious. Once you understand how the brain works, because language learning is not just memory, it is adaptation through repeated exposure. And this is exactly why immersion changes everything. The second learner is training the brain all day long without even realizing it. Every small exposure strengthens familiarity. Every repeated phrase becomes easier to recognize. Every English sound becomes less foreign. And slowly the brain begins predicting patterns automatically, which is exactly what fluency really is. And this is why some people suddenly improve their listening and speaking dramatically after months of consuming English media consistently, because their brain stopped treating English like isolated information and started treating it like a living environment. And here is another powerful example. Imagine someone who watches one English interview every day for 3 months. At first, they understand only small parts. The speed feels overwhelming, and the pronunciation feels confusing. But after repeated daily exposure, something surprising happens. Their brain starts recognizing these recurring phrases automatically, like, to be honest, actually, I mean. And without studying grammar directly, they begin understanding natural rhythm and sentence flow instinctively, and eventually they start using those same patterns naturally in their own speaking. Not because they memorized rules, but because immersion trained their subconscious language system through repetition and familiarity. And this is the moment many learners suddenly say, wow, this feels different. Because for the first time, English stops feeling like a test and starts feeling like a normal part of life. And once English becomes emotionally familiar instead of mentally stressful, your progress accelerates in ways traditional study methods rarely create, because immersion teaches your brain to live with English instead of merely study it from a distance. So now the big question becomes very practical. How do you actually build immersion into your life every single day without feeling overwhelmed? And the answer is simpler than most people think, because real immersion is not about studying harder. It is about changing your environment little by little until English becomes part of your normal daily experience. And here is a very simple immersion system you can start using immediately. First, begin your morning with English input before your native language takes over your brain completely. Even 5 or 10 minutes matters. Listen to a short English podcast while getting ready. Watch a simple YouTube video while eating breakfast. Or hear natural English conversations during your commute, because the first language your brain hears each day affects your mental rhythm more than you realize. Then during the day, create small moments of passive immersion everywhere possible. Scroll social media in English for a few minutes instead of your native language. Follow creators who speak naturally and clearly. Read short captions, comments, headlines, or memes in English, because these tiny exposures train your brain continuously without feeling like heavy study. And then comes the most important part, active immersion. Every day you must interact with English in some ways. Not just consume it passively. Repeat phrases out loud from videos, shadow short clips, answer simple questions to yourself, describe what you are doing in English while walking or cooking. Even small sentences like, I'm making coffee, or I need to finish this today, matter more than you think, because they build direct connections between thoughts and English without translation. And at night, finish your day with more relaxed immersion. Instead of stressful studying, listen to English while resting, watch a simple series with subtitles, or replay familiar content your brain already enjoys, because repetition creates comfort, and comfort accelerates adaptation. And the most powerful part of this system is that immersion works through consistency, not intensity. You do not need 6 hours of painful studying. You need repeated daily contact with English until your brain stops seeing it as something unusual. And slowly over time, something incredible happens. Phrases become familiar automatically. Listening becomes less exhausting. Pronunciation starts improving naturally through exposure. And your speaking reactions become faster because your brain has heard English patterns thousands of times in meaningful contexts. And this is exactly why immersion feels so different from traditional learning. Traditional learning asks your brain to memorize information consciously. Immersion teaches your brain to adapt subconsciously through repeated real-world exposure. And once that adaptation process begins, English slowly stops feeling like work and starts becoming something your brain recognizes as part of everyday life naturally and automatically. Right now, I do not want you to just understand immersion as an idea. I want you to experience how powerful it feels when your brain starts interacting with English naturally instead of studying it like a school subject. So let's do something together right now. Something simple but extremely important. And I want you to follow immediately without overthinking. First, imagine you wake up in the morning and instead of opening social media in your native language, you hear 1 minute of natural English audio, maybe a podcast, maybe a short YouTube clip, maybe someone casually saying, "Good morning, everyone. Today, we're talking about daily habits." And instead of translating every word, you simply listen and let the sounds enter your brain naturally. Now, repeat one short phrase out loud. Today we're talking about daily habits. Again, today we're talking about daily habits. Faster now. Notice how repetition starts making the sentence feel more familiar already. Now imagine you are walking outside and quietly thinking simple thoughts in English like, "It's really hot today," or "I need coffee." Say one of those sentences out loud right now. Not perfectly, just naturally. Because this is exactly how immersion trains your brain through small repeated contact with meaningful English throughout the day. Now let's go further. Imagine you open YouTube and hear someone say, "I used to be afraid of speaking English." Repeat it immediately. "I used to be afraid of speaking English." Now answer with your own sentence. Maybe "me too," or "I still feel nervous sometimes." Speak without stopping to analyze grammar, because immersion works when your brain focuses on communications instead of perfection. And now I want you to notice something important. The more you hear English, repeat English, think in English, and respond in English throughout normal daily life, the less foreign English begins emotionally think fotionally, and fotiona, and fotionally. And that emotional familiarity matters more than most learners realize, because fluency grows fastest when the brain feels relaxed around the language instead of stressed by it. And this is why immersion practice changes everything. It slowly removes the psychological distance between you and English. It turns English from study material into part of your everyday environment. And over time, your brain begins predicting patterns automatically, understanding faster, reacting quicker, and speaking more naturally without forcing every sentence consciously. And that transformation starts with very small actions, repeated consistently every day. Not huge effort, not perfect grammar, just regular contact with real English until your brain adapts naturally to hearing it, understanding it, and eventually using it comfortably in real-life conversations. Now, this is where immersion becomes much deeper than language learning, because the real transformation is not only happening in your English skills, it is happening in your identity. For years, you may have seen yourself as someone trying to learn English, someone outside the language looking in, someone waiting for the future moment when you finally become confident enough to speak naturally. But that mindset quietly creates distance between you and fluency, because your brain keeps treating English like something foreign, temporary, and stressful instead of something normal and familiar. And this is why immersion changes everything psychologically, because immersion slowly removes that distance day by day. The more English becomes part of your normal environment, the more your brain stops resisting it emotionally. And eventually, something powerful happens. You stop feeling like a student studying English, and start feeling like a person living around English naturally. And that shift is incredibly important because confidence is not created by forcing yourself to feel brave. Confidence is created by familiarity. When your brain hears English every day through videos, podcasts, conversations, music, books, social media, and real exposure, English slowly becomes emotionally normal instead of mentally threatening. And once something feels normal, fear will occur, loses its power little by little, and this explains why many learners who immerse themselves daily suddenly notice surprising changes. They begin understanding phrases automatically, reacting faster during conversations, thinking small thoughts in English naturally, and even feeling more emotionally connected to the language itself, because immersion trains not only understanding but emotional comfort. And emotional comfort is one of the hidden foundations of fluency because the brain learns fastest in environments where it feels safe and familiar, not stressed and constantly judged. And this is exactly why traditional systems often fail learners emotionally. They create pressure before familiarity, correction before comfort, fear before adaptation, and over time, this brain associates English with anxiety instead of communication. But immersion reverses that process completely. Immersion tells the brain this language is part of everyday life now. And once the brain accepts that idea, adaptation begins happening naturally beneath the surface. And from this moment forward, I want you to stop asking yourself, when will I finally become fluent? And start asking yourself, how can I make English part of my life every single day? Because fluency is not a sudden event. It is the result of living around English long enough for your brain to stop fighting it and start adapting to it naturally. And once you understand that deeply, your relationship with English changes forever. Because now you are no longer chasing fluency desperately. You are building an environment where fluency can grow automatically over time. Now, I want to give you a challenge that may completely change the way your brain experiences English. And the challenge is simple. For the next 7 days, stop treating English like a subject you only study sometimes and start treating it like an environment you live inside every single day. And this challenge does not require perfect grammar, expensive courses, or hours of painful studying. It only requires consistent exposure and daily interaction. So here are the rules. From the moment you wake up until the moment you sleep, you must create as much English exposure around yourself as possible. When you wake up, listen to English audio before checking content in your native language. During meals, watch short English videos. While walking or commuting, listen to podcasts or interviews. Scroll social media in English. Read captions and comments in English. Follow English-speaking creators, and most importantly, speak small English sentences throughout the day, even if nobody is around you. Describe your actions, express simple thoughts, repeat phrases from videos, and react to content out loud naturally. And there is one very important rule during this challenge. You are not allowed to stop because you feel imperfect. Because the purpose of immersion is not perfection. The purpose is adaptation. And adaptation only happens when your brain experiences repeated contact with English consistently enough to stop resisting it emotionally. And during the first few days, your brain may feel uncomfortable because it is not used to hearing English so often. You may feel mentally tired or tempted to switch back completely to your native language. But if you continue, something surprising will begin happening. Common phrases will start feeling familiar automatically. Listening will become less exhausting. Your fear of English sounds will decrease, and you will begin reacting faster without translating every word consciously. And that is the moment you will realize immersion is not magic, it is brain adaptation through repeated exposure. And at the end of every day, I want you to record yourself speaking English for 1 minute about your day, not perfectly, just honestly, because these recordings will prove something powerful to you over time. Your speaking ability grows fastest when English becomes part of daily life instead of isolated study sessions. And if you complete this challenge seriously for 7 days, your relationship with English may begin changing in ways years of traditional learning never created, because for the first time, you are no longer trying to force fluency through pressure. You are allowing fluency to grow naturally through immersion, repetition, and daily emotional familiarity with the language itself. So now everything comes down to one simple decision. Are you going to continue treating English like something you only study occasionally? Or are you finally ready to surround your life with it every single day? Until your brain naturally adapts, because the truth is, fluency is not hidden inside one perfect grammar book or one secret method. Fluency grows from daily contact, daily listening, daily speaking, daily exposure. And the moment English becomes part of your everyday environment, your progress changes completely. And right now, I want you to stop waiting for confidence before using English. Because confidence is created through immersion, not before it. Every podcast you hear, every English video you watch, every phrase you repeat, every small thought you think in English is slowly reshaping your brain beneath the surface, even when you do not notice it immediately. And one day you suddenly realize conversations feel less stressful, listening feels more natural, and words start coming out faster than before, not because you forced fluency, but because your brain adapted through repeated exposure over time. And that is why I want you to make English part of your daily life starting today, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but now, because the longer you wait, the longer fear controls your progress. And before you leave, I want you to do one very important thing. I want you to say one sentence in English out loud right now. Any sentence. Even something simple like, English is part of my life now. Or, I can improve every day. Because that one sentence is more powerful than you think. It is the beginning of immersion, the beginning of action, the beginning of a new identity, the identity of someone who no longer studies English from a distance, but lives around it daily. And once you begin living around English consistently, even imperfectly, your brain will slowly stop resisting the language and start adapting to it naturally. And that is when real fluency finally begins. So do not leave this video and return to old habits. Change your environment. Hear English daily. Speak daily. Immerse yourself daily and say one sentence right now. And when you say that one sentence out loud today, even if your pronunciation is imperfect, even if you still feel nervous, I want you to understand something very important. Your brain is already beginning to change because every moment of immersion sends a signal to your mind that English is no longer something distant or temporary. It is becoming part of your real life. And that small shift may seem simple now, but over time it becomes incredibly powerful. Because fluency is not created in dramatic moments, it is created quietly through repeated daily exposure that slowly transforms the way your brain reacts to the language. One podcast at a time, one video at a time, one repeated phrase at a time, one small conversation at a time. And this is why people who immerse themselves consistently eventually sound more natural without even realizing exactly when the change happened, because the brain adapts gradually beneath the surface until one day English no longer feels unfamiliar, and that moment feels almost unbelievable because you suddenly notice you are understanding faster, reacting quicker, speaking with less fear, and thinking less about translation. And all of that happened not because you forced your brain through pressure, but because you gave it an environment where adaptation could happen naturally every single day. And from this moment forward, I want you to stop measuring your progress only by grammar tests or perfect sentences. Instead, measure your progress by exposure, by consistency, by how often English exists in your daily life. Because the more your brain lives around English, the more naturally it will begin using English. And remember this clearly, the goal of immersion is not to become perfect overnight. The goal is to make English feel normal enough that your brain stops resisting it emotionally. Because once English feels emotionally normal, your confidence grows automatically. Your listening improves naturally, and your speaking becomes faster without forcing every word consciously. And one day, you will look back at the old version of yourself, the version that felt frozen, embarrassed, and afraid to speak, and you will realize something incredible. The person who finally became more fluent was not the person who studied the hardest, it was the person who stayed connected to English consistently every single day until the brain adapted naturally. So keep hearing English, keep speaking English, keep surrounding your life with English, even in small moments, because those small moments are changing you far more than you realize right now. And if you continue immersing yourself daily, sentence by sentence, exposure by exposure, your future self may one day speak English with a level of comfort and confidence that once felt impossible, all because you decided not just to study English anymore, but to live around it every single day. Immerse yourself in English every single day by listening to podcasts, watching videos, reading books, scrolling social media in English, repeating phrases out loud, thinking simple thoughts in English, and surrounding your brain with constant exposure until English starts feeling natural instead of stressful. Because fluency is not built through occasional studying, but through daily adaptation and repeated contact with real English. And if this video helped change the way you see learning English, you can support the channel by liking and subscribing, so I can continue creating practical videos that help everyday learners build real speaking confidence naturally, step by step.